So my presentation is entitled "A First Timer's View of the Virtual Classroom," and as I was putting together this presentation, I struggled a little bit, wondering what I was going to say and why Pat had asked me to speak in the first place, because as I reviewed the program, I said, but all of these people are really into this IT thing and they know what they're doing and they're really using it at a fairly detailed level in their classes. I really have nothing much to report. But Pat had prevailed upon me, and she's been so useful to me in the past academic year. I felt duty bound to respond to the call. So it is really, I think, maybe its utility would be its contrast with the previous presentations in terms of indicating to you really a beginner's view. And I'm going to start off and just give you a little bit of my background, general orientation, because I think that significantly impacts, at least I've found that it has significantly impacted on my approach to e-learning and my use of technology in the classroom. And then I'm also going to look at a little bit, just share with you some law-specific concerns, because I tend to feel that a lot of, as you saw today, I was asking questions from a law perspective, because I find sometimes some of the lessons, as Desiree was mentioning earlier, are not necessarily transferable. It very much, you have to custom fit it to your situation. And if you could find the control on that, then I would log in and just put it up, thanks. And then I'll just look quickly at e-learning of Moodle and PowerPoint, and sort of the focus of the presentation is really on the Illuminate software, which is why Pat had asked me to speak, to just share my experiences as a first-time user of a totally virtual classroom software. And then I'll have a few concluding comments for you. So, in terms of my orientation and background, I'm computer literate, have been for a long time, but I'm one of those people who just use my computer for word processing, email, and the internet. And I make no apologies about that one. I'm not going to change anytime soon. And in addition to that, more and more, I've been using or forced to use PowerPoint in the context of teaching. Started off in the master's program in the MITP program, Masters in International Trade Policy, and they mandate that you have to use PowerPoint, and that was the first time that I used PowerPoint, and I found it quite useful in fairness, and therefore it sort of graduated from there to my undergraduate classes. I would say I'm very much old school, as you would tell. My husband is actually an IT professional, but that doesn't help me any. I'm very much old school, much to his internal frustration. I like reading a book, as in a physical book. I don't want to read it on the computer. I don't want to read it on the Kindle. I want to curl up in my bed and hold the book in my hand, or sit in the chair and hold the book in my hand. And I'll only use the format when I have to, or, for convenience, really, if I'm traveling or something like that. My first exposure to teaching technology in the context of using technology in the context of the classroom was the Cuttle program. And then also some training done, this type of an environment. So really, in coming into the university environment, I was very much a traditional, I was educated at the University of the West Indies here. Didn't have any problem with my program, was taught the traditional way, loved it, enjoyed it, had a good time. And so I really wasn't aware of there being any significant change or anything like that. And it was really through Dr. Henry and Patricia that I was able to get a better sense that things are changing, the environment is changing, and we're trying to change the way in which we're teaching and recognizing that persons learn in different ways, and so we have to adapt our teaching accordingly. And in that regard, I would say that I came to find out, in learning that, you say, oh my goodness, but there must have been so many people that were lost in my classes for so long, because I'm not a visual learner, and I am not a kinetic learner. Oh, I left my little piece of paper down there. Oh, no. I brought this to show you. That's as far as I got in that thing, right? The first step. I couldn't follow any further. And Dr. Henry, Glenda can testify, right? I had to give it up. And Dr. Henry can testify. I don't know if she remembers when she was doing her, she remembers. There was some session, and they had diagrams like circles and triangles and stuff like that. And you're supposed to say what it was. I still don't know. And all of these people were saying, oh, it looks like a train. And I told her, that's the one class. I was totally lost. I could not function in that class at all. So you can understand the constraints that I deal with in the context of the new technologies. But that having been said, as I said, that is not in any way to detract from the legitimacy and the validity of the concerns in terms of trying to reach students in terms of their learning capacities to the extent possible. In terms of law-specific concerns, in terms of our program, certainly for me, for some reason I can't get onto the system, so I think as I said, the supernatural forces are punishing me. In terms of law-specific concerns, what I have certainly for us in law, to my mind, this is my assessment only, critical thought and analytical skills are key within a law program for law students. The verbal skills, critical. As a lawyer, you have to be able to use language effectively and correctly, as I tell my students all the time, because they tend to be very loose with language. You need writing skills. Those are critical. And research skills, key within the law program as well. And I would say as well, reading. And I added on that one in reflection for this discussion, because I find sometimes in our discussions about technology and our use of technology and trying to break down things for the students, I think sometimes some of them are losing some of the basic skills, certainly from my perspective, that they need for a law program, that they need to be able to function effectively as lawyers. Because as lawyers, you can't get away from reading. And every time I go to do a course and the students tell me, oh my goodness, it's so much reading. And I said, but you're in the wrong program then. If you don't want to read, yes, it's a lot, but that's the nature of the program. That's the career you've chosen for yourself, because inevitably your client is going to come to you and it's, they might ask you something on family law. You might have never done family law in the faculty of law. You have to go and sit down and research and read and bring yourself up to speed and be able to advise them accordingly. So, So now in terms of, just moving on, so that's sort of the backdrop against which I approach the whole issue of teaching and using technology in the classroom. And so first, just a few comments about my use of Moodle and PowerPoint within the classroom and what I've found in relation to it, and just trying to tie into some of the comments that were made by some of the presenters earlier. I am one of those, I plead guilty, that uses Moodle primarily for dumping course content, Glenda, right? So, and that's no, to be fair to both, to Patricia in particular, I have to say I am aware now that Moodle does more things, having done her training course, and I'm encouraged to do more things with it. But sort of at the bottom line, at least what I would do is to put my course materials, my course outline, description of the course. This academic year, what I've done is to include some class exercises that we would do in class, but basically I've put them online beforehand that they would have access to them. Tutorial questions are put online, and the worksheets. I also have used Moodle for class announcements, so I found it a convenient mode for communicating with the class from a convenience point of view and reaching everybody in one fell swoop. I've also encouraged, as I said, by the discussions with the EMS unit, I've tried to, this semester, this academic year, include I teach a course called International Trade Law, which basically deals with the World Trade Organization. And so what I've tried to do is to put some links to some current events that are going on, sometimes related directly to what we're talking about in class. But equally, I've tried, because I'm constantly trying to encourage them. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. If it's not coming on the exam, the students don't want to know about it. And I'm always challenging them to think beyond the exam. When I was taught in the faculty of law, it was never about the exam. I always remember Norma Ford used to say, I'm not teaching you for an exam, I'm teaching you for practice, I'm teaching you for life. So it doesn't matter whether this is coming on the exam or not, this is going to allow you to function as a professional. And that's certainly the approach I take. So I've been trying, besides linking to things within the classroom, to sort of get them to have this sense of the relevance of international trade. Because, of course, what I can cover in the 12 weeks is quite basic. But at the same time, there are some very important social discussions going on about trade and how it relates to our everyday life. Case in point being, for example, something like health and intellectual property. How does intellectual property rights impact on our access to medicines? And now the current debate that we have, which is the one that I had posted online for them, was there's a current huge debate raging within the WTO and internationally on efforts by governments to regulate the use of cigarettes. And so, you have that very graphic advertising that certainly Australia has engaged in. So you see pictures on the cigarette. I wouldn't even have uploaded it for you. On the cigarette box, you just see a picture of the person with the larynx, etc., all eaten away, and the hole is there for all the blood and goriness, etc. And they also have been limiting their ability to use the trademark on the packaging. They have to put it very, very small and those types of things. And that's actually a big debate now. Like, are you unduly infringing on these companies' intellectual property rights? So I've been trying to help encourage interest in the course and engagement in the course by helping them to understand some of the relevance of the course or the issues that we're dealing with in the course over and above what we're doing in the context of the exam. And I think, as I said, I only did it this semester with these students, but I think there's been some relatively good feedback in that regard. In terms of PowerPoint, I use PowerPoint to deliver my classes now primarily. I actually had Dr. Henry sitting on one of my lectures, and I would say in that regard that certainly I don't have any problems using PowerPoint per se in terms of manipulating it, putting in the text, etc. But what I've come to realize, having done CUTL, having done some of the training with the EMS unit, is that there's much more to PowerPoint than just putting in the text. And that actually you're using PowerPoint at a very basic level. So maybe it's just as well that my presentation didn't come up, because it wouldn't show very well on me in terms of what I learned in the EMS. So, but the idea being that there's a need to integrate, to fully exploit the multimedia dimensions of PowerPoint. And this links very much, I've come to realize, to the different ways in which people learn. For me, I can just read the text and I'm fine. But I actually had a class where Sylvia was in the class at the time. I was explaining a concept to the students, thought it was clear, said it a few times, encouraged them to ask a question. They clearly didn't understand. They asked me to go over it again. And so I just, out of nowhere, because I'm not a visual person, decided to do a Venn diagram. So I go on the board, and I hate math, so where's the at? So I go on the board and I draw this Venn diagram, because I'm basically saying these two concepts are linked. One is like a subset of the other kind of a thing, but there's an area where they don't overlap. And they actually understood. I thought it was very basic. I thought it was actually very simplistic. I didn't think it was particularly useful. But that was the best. Rather than repeating the same thing that I'd said already, I decided to just try the Venn diagram route at the very simple level that I could think about it as a non-visual person. And it actually worked. And so I came to recognize how, even through something like PowerPoint, etc., integrating those elements of it, the auditory and the visuals and the, you know, the charts, etc., can actually, even though it might seem simplistic to me, or my level of thinking about it might be simplistic because I'm a little challenged in that regard, it can actually still make a significant impact in terms of conveying ideas about difficult or complicated concepts. So that's certainly something that I've challenged myself with, and intend that in the upcoming semester, I would definitely go through. I've done the training with EMS, and I now have to go through that work of trying to integrate some of these elements without being too high-tech into my PowerPoint presentations. The other challenge that I've found in relation to PowerPoint is that, and it's something that Dr. Henry had highlighted to me as well, that the downside of utilizing too much text is that it sort of becomes a substitute for lecture again, and it is something that in the materials that the EMS has circulated about the PowerPoint that they did highlight, that students basically use it as a substitute for taking notes, and they disengage with you in the classroom and are just trying to write down, because I think Dr. Gay's presentation I spoke, and somebody was complaining about they don't have time to write down what's on the slides, and I'm like, you're not supposed to be writing down what's on the slides. So but the idea is, because there's so much text, they see it as a substitute for, just another way to take notes, making their note taking easier, as opposed to actually an interactive mechanism. So you have to be cognizant of that, sensitive to that, and try to address that in terms of not overloading it with content from a textual point of view. In terms of the student response to PowerPoint, I think I haven't done any study or anything like that, but from the feedback that I get from the students, it seems as if quite a few lecturers use PowerPoint. And so now there's quite a bit of an expectation within the student body, I would say, that they kind of take it, they appreciate it, and now it's almost an expectation. They kind of feel that they've been shortchanged if you don't present in PowerPoint. I actually taught this last semester a first-year course for the first time. And so I hadn't had a chance to sort of do the whole PowerPoint thing. I was co-teaching with someone else in any event. And this year, they actually came into the class when I was just finishing up with my trade class, and they saw me taking down the machine and stuff. And one of the students said, "Mom, how come you didn't give us PowerPoint when we were?" She was feeling so hard done by. How come the second and the third years get PowerPoint and we don't get PowerPoint? And I said, learning curve. Don't worry, you'll get it next time around. So I find that certainly they're quite receptive as sort of supporting the general conclusions coming out of Dr. Gay's research, that students are quite receptive to, at the very least, the basic tools of using Moodle to post course content and information about the courses, as well as utilization of PowerPoint within classes. So that's Moodle and PowerPoint. In terms of Illuminate, which is sort of, I said, the raison d'etre for Patricia asking me to speak. The faculty this current academic year, Faculty of Law, took a decision to offer its LMM programs totally virtual for financial reasons primarily, I think, not pedagogic reasons, but that's the spin-off benefit. Because previously we used the video conferencing facilities, and of course it was extremely expensive. Because we would have a number of students and non-Barbadian-based students. And so the decision was taken that they would offer all of the master's programs via Illuminate, and sort of everybody just kind of had to get on board. And we had a day of training, a day long of training, facilitated by EMS. And it was myself, I think, is about two or three other lecturers here based in Cave Hill, another two in Mona, and there was one that was somewhere in Cayman or somewhere like that. My lecture was actually once weekly from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. on a Friday. I actually chose that slot, so it's not that I was being abused in any way by the Faculty of Law. I had 9 students. It's a master's program, as I said, and it's an elective, my course, so we don't have the problem of huge classes at that level. So there are 9 students, and only one of those students was based in Barbados. So it was really quite useful to have this technology that allowed us to connect without forcing them to come physically to Barbados to learn this information. In terms of the Illuminate software, you're basically assigned a role. So as moderator, I had control of what took place within the classroom. I would upload through PowerPoint, upload my presentation onto the screen, and I would then control who could speak. If I wanted to turn off mics, it's quite an interactive software, very useful. So if whatever you want to do, you can pretty much do. If you don't want them to talk, you turn off their mics. You can do videos, so they can, if you want to see pictures of them, etc., they can upload a picture of themselves, so you're not just talking in midair. And as I said, we all have different roles. There's a chat facility, so if they can chat among themselves, they can chat with me, I can stop them from chatting if it's being too disruptive within the classroom. So it's quite a dynamic set of software. At the end of the class, the software is actually, it records the lecture. And so as Dr. Gay mentioned, what happens is that even if students can't make it to the class, for whatever reason, they're able to then go to this link. Once the class is finished, a link is emailed to everyone, and once you click on that link, I'm there live to you, like if you were sitting in the classroom with me. I actually found that quite useful, a useful feature in sense of I actually thought people might use it as an excuse not to come to the class in the assigned time, but I didn't find that to be my experience. I was surprised. So students pretty much came, signed in when they were to sign in, etc., and when they couldn't make it, were very apologetic. So I think it's quite a useful tool in terms of from a review point of view, that you can go back to the lecture and go back to the lecture and go back to the lecture at your own pace. And I also actually had a student in my class who was Seventh-day Adventist. So if she didn't have that facility, she would not have been able to take the class because my class fell within her Sabbath. And so she was able to, and she passed and did well on the course. She actually just participated in the class via just listening to my lectures. Of course, the downside of that is that she didn't get to participate in the discussions that would have taken place within class. But obviously, as I said, she had religious constraints. So for the most part, she was really the only person that would have used exclusively the lecture feature. Everybody else signed in when they were to sign in and would have just been using the saved lecture as a backup, reinforcement, go over, that type of a thing. So it was quite useful from that point of view. As I said, obviously it was new software, so training had to be conducted by the university, facilitated by EMS. And that was a one-day work or so, and then another day, I think Patricia did a number of individual sessions thereafter as people became more and more panicked as the deadline for offering your course came closer. And also Dirk Hernandez in the back, between the two of them. And I really have to give them their kudos. They provided strong technical support to us. As you know, the supernatural forces with the technology. I mean, one night I was talking, and all of a sudden my mic went. And of course, if the mic goes, you can't deliver the class, right? I'm like, I haven't turned off the mic. I don't know what happened. I called my husband from downstairs. I'm like, Andre, he doesn't know what to do. So I said, okay, Patricia gave me her home number. That's like 8 o'clock at night, you know. I'm like, I'm going to call Patricia because I don't want to call the class a waste, right? And there was Patricia, and Patricia signed in, and she figured out something that I'd done that I didn't realize I'd done, and the mic came back on, and, you know, we were off and running again. So really, that technical, in terms of the program, I would say certainly if you don't have an IT background, it's important that you have that connection in terms of a backup person who can assist you, because there's nothing too high-tech, but of course, if the mic isn't working, and you don't know how to get it working again, it might as well be the most complicated problem because you're not going to be able to offer your course. I would say in terms of the student response and engagement within the program, in terms of the offering of the course through this mode was very good. I was actually surprised, once again, coming from my traditional background. I was a little bit skeptical, as I told Patricia, about offering a course in a wholly virtual environment. I'm a very sort of interactive person at a personal level with my students. I like to see them and talk with them and see the body language and that type of a thing. And I thought I would lose a lot of that dynamic in the context of a virtual environment where I'm not seeing the students, they're just hearing my voice, I'm just hearing their voice. And how would you create that feeling of connectivity, of still an intimate setting where you're teaching and interacting with each other. And I was pleasantly surprised that it happened. You know, it just happened that maybe I was fortunate in that it was a smallish group of just 9. But, you know, immediately we were talking to each other and be, hello, hello, anybody out there? And then, you know, everybody would sign in and say goodnight and we'd all be chatting and et cetera. So I found that was quite useful. That was a pleasant surprise. Also, what was useful in terms of creating that type of an environment was the chat feature. As I said, students would chat among themselves, but as moderator, I see everything. So I can see whatever they're doing. The all-seeing eye is on, and there's actually a icon with the all-seeing eye, right? So I have the all-seeing eye. So I can monitor the discussions that's taking place between them, but at the same time, they can also chat with me. You know, they would send through a question, because they can also raise their hand virtually and ask me a question. But I found that a lot of them just prefer to type in the question, send it to me, and I would take note of it and answer it accordingly. And there was also, too, I found that the chat feature facilitated a little bit of peer teaching, because, you know, sometimes somebody would ask a question before I could jump in. You know, somebody else would say, well, I think such and such. And that was useful for me because then I get a better sense of if people are really understanding. Because then I'm not answering the questions all the time. And actually, there was one situation where the student wanted an example. And another student came up with a way better example than I did. You know, they said, oh, it would be like such and such in this situation. You know, they were able to use a everyday situation with some company that we all know from the Caribbean or whatever. And, you know, so that was quite useful. In terms of from my perspective as a lecturer, I found the software the virtual environment quite convenient, because I was able to teach class at my convenience, in my sofa, in my home clothes, you know, in my t-shirt and whatever. I didn't have to be all glammed up for class. And we actually had a situation where because one of the classes, not mine, but another lecturer's, was offered on Saturdays. And that Saturday was the Saturday that we had some really bad weather. And she was like, she was one that she didn't do the Illuminate. And she was like, I can now appreciate it, because rather than coming to trudge down to campus to still offer her class through video conferencing, she would have been able to stay home in the comfort of her home and just cozy up and offer it that way. So concluding comments. I would say that overall I've had a positive experience. My skepticism is notwithstanding, I would still say that I have had today a positive experience with the integration of technology into my teaching. I have a far more way to go. And I'm quite grateful for the exposure that I've received through Cuttle and through the EMS training in terms of the many possibilities that are out there. Really what has constrained me thus far has really just been time. And so I'm hoping over this summer to do some work in terms of the PowerPoint and the creating a more exciting interface on Moodle and these types of things. But at least I'm aware of them now. As I said, I was particularly surprised by the experience with the positive nature of the experience that I had with the Illuminate, bearing in mind that it was totally virtual and we're totally dependent on technology in that context. But I still would like to flag, and this is the final point, some challenges from my perspective. As I said, I think there's a challenge in terms of the mindset. So I do struggle sometimes to think in the way in which you need to think, because I think, you know, I think you have to, my piece of paper thing, I think your brain has to work in a particular way for it to come to you easily. Outside of that, you really have to work at it. I'm one of these people that have to work at it. It doesn't come to me easily. And that relates to the next challenge, which is time constraints. and also the issue of planning. As Desiree pointed out in her presentation earlier this morning, I think, what comes through to me in all of these presentations and everything that I do as I'm exposed more to these technologies is the amount of planning that has to go into your classes if you are to really make effective use of these technologies. And then the other challenge, infrastructure, I already talked about that. I won't talk about that again, but there's certain infrastructural needs that you have to maintain. Training, as I said, I think we're doing a good job thus far, but we have to continue with the training. And the final point is just some brief concerns from an intellectual property perspective. I don't know that they're insurmountable, but I think as we move our teaching, I think we have challenges with IP in our regular format. Furthermore, when we move it then to the digital environment, the IP issues become a little bit challenging. For the Illuminate, for my course in particular, one of the things that Professor Ventos and the faculty is supposed to give me some feedback on is that, of course, since we're virtual, they're there, our law library is here. And so they don't have access to the materials in the way that if they were here, they would do. But my particular challenge is much of the resources aren't here. They're online. They're things that I subscribe to, journals or whatever, that either we don't have an institutional subscription to. So how do you, because if you're doing something totally online, you really need to have the students then be able to electronically access that information, but you have to make sure that in distributing that information, you're not breaching any copyright rules. So that's really the only sort of challenge real challenge that we haven't quite figured out fully the answer to in the context of our LMM experience. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you.